Thanks, Netta. Good morning, everyone. I'm just going to offer some initial housekeeping items before we kick the fireside chat off. So for the next half hour, we'll have the fireside chat, and I'll be receiving Q&A. In the bottom right hand of your screen, you can see a little Q&A button. So if you have a question through the webinar, click that, type your question in, and we'll do our best to get those at the end. And then following our Q&A session, we'll move straight into the startup pitches, where we'll also have some opportunity for some Q&A. So really excited for this morning, and I'll hand it over to you, Saeed and Jochen.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Jochen, for joining us in this webinar. This is becoming a new way to work, to meet, to hopefully give value to our community. Last week, I had an incredible fireside chat with Matthias of Vesco, which is one of our automotive corporate partners. And unfortunately, because they have 10 plants in China, more than 10,000 people, they had an event in Stuttgart right before with some Chinese visitors, and that was the cause of them having the first cases in Germany. And quite frankly, when we talked to Matthias and he said how he dealt with it was very helpful for our other corporate partners, because you never know how you react till it's actually happened to us. And I'm unfortunately want to mention we had 2 cases among my colleagues, one in Europe, one in US, and Matthias' talk was incredible helpful for us. Plus he shared his best practices manual, which we shared with whoever wants it. So this is how we initiated this speaker series. But Dr. Jochen, I wanted to go to the beginning. Do you remember how we met?
Yeah, hi everybody. Hi Saeed, and hi to your team. Thanks for having me today. And of course, how could I ever forget how we met and started this successful relationship. So actually I met first Julia from your team in Boston at an event, and at that time we have been looking in how to engage with the startup ecosystem and really benefit from startups. I always have believed in this symbiotic benefits that you can create between startups and big corporates if you do it right. And then I came to California, and you were so nice to host me there and have a discussion. And so yeah, that's how it started, and never regretted it, to be honest.
Yes, I remember you came to our headquarters and you were in search of finding some partner to go through this journey of working with startups. And I remember we had a great discussion. And then I believe I came to see you in Munich, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you did. You came to Munich, and we went to Penzberg, our site outside of Munich, which is actually very close to the Webasto sites that you just mentioned. So where the first outbreak in Germany did happen. In Penzberg is a big site for us. It's actually the only site for Roche where we have pharma and diagnostics operations and R&D in one site co-located. We have about 6,000 people there, also produce some of the tests or some elements of the tests for the COVID testing. But yeah, it's a big site, and for you it was probably a little bit a different world, somewhere in the forest in Bavaria. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed that also, and was a good insight.
Yes, it was fantastic, and I must say you're a great tour guide, because you were kind enough to pick me up at, I believe, Sofitel by the railroad, And then you drove really fast in the Autobahn. I remember I was a little bit scared, you know, after giving me a quick tour of downtown Munich, we went to Pittsburgh and I met the rest of your colleagues and we presented what we're going to do together.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe for the audience, you can explain why we are working with 2 batches, roughly 10 startups every 6 months, and what is Roche would like to achieve from this relationship?
Yeah. So for us, I mean, clearly one reason why Plug and Play was a good partner for us, because we are a global company, right? And we wanted to engage with the leading company for accelerators globally that can help us to really find the best startups globally, right? Yes, we have our headquarter of Startup Criosphere in Munich, but clearly we are looking for globally the best startups. And then we are looking for a program that is very hands-on, right? We wanted to engage with people and the startups. So we said, yes, we are an innovation team, but we don't want an innovation startup zoo where we have only a few people of Roche interacting with startups. We wanted to make sure many people interact with startups. And also, I think the variety of industries that Plug and Play has, the different verticals, is a very good inspirational aspect of the programs you host. And you know, we have seen that, for example, with a company like Reflect in our batch, an augmented reality company, definitely not at all our expertise, but you basically found very quickly a company, a startup, it's a bit more advanced startup, but a small company that fits extremely well to our needs. And so I think this combination of having the diversity of startups, an open innovation approach, having good startups globally, that was actually what made for us the difference.
You know, if I can also mention, Roche was the primary reason we opened the health practice in Munich, but I am also very pleased that you welcome open innovation. And now we have Sanofi and other groups also on the platform. Can you comment for me, why are you ready to do open innovation with other companies on the same platform?
Yeah. Well, on the one hand, I'm still wondering what effects the Oktoberfest played in the decision to open the Plug and Play office in Munich. There might also be an aspect here, but no, jokes aside. Open innovation, I mean, especially in healthcare, and you know, it's a very complex industry where you need a lot of stakeholders to implement new solutions. And if you look, for example, at Sanofi, the other founding member, this is the Sanofi Consumer Health, right? So they have a very different expertise on how to engage, more like with consumers. We have now also some providers included. So we wanted to make sure we have, from the beginning, when we talk about an innovation, a new topic, all the stakeholders engaged, because what does it help if we develop a nice technology, a nice solution, and then after we have that, then we try to convince somebody else to pay for it or to use it, right? So really this bringing all the stakeholders together and openly share their ideas and also the needs for an innovation.
Wonderful. I recall in some of the expos that I came to Munich, we had, I think, more than 10 of your colleagues flying from Switzerland, flying from your other international hubs to meet the startups. And let's say, what would success look like to you in 2019 from roughly the 20 startups that went through the program?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so from the 20, well, I think it was 27, now the last 7, they are a little bit younger. So we finished the last batch in February. But from the 20 before, we have 10 now that are actually integrated into real collaboration projects, which is more than I would have expected, to be honest, when we started this 2 years ago. But then there we have really contracts. We have, I think, 3 of them where we are working with hospitals and patients together. So we are actually already addressing needs of patients, changing clinical workflows, creating data. We have one where we have joined a clinical trial together with the startup. So this is for us what success looks like. We really implement these solutions in projects.
Wonderful. You know, Ola, the CEO of Mercedes, told me one day that what we want to do is to reach out and meet technology and entrepreneurs and bundle it with our capabilities of scaling, production, global, and that makes us implement faster. Is that, do you believe that as well?
Yes, I think that's exactly the same situation for us. And if you talk to our startups, and maybe later on, you'll also hear something from the startups that are pitching, that's what they see as a benefit. I mean, we are the market leader globally in vitro diagnostics, so we can open a lot of doors for startups. And that starts already during the batch when we bring the startups to customers to get feedback to their solutions. That helps our colleagues, our country representatives to also understand the value of a solution from a startup and the needs of the customer. And that's where it already comes together. And then at the end, yes, we can help with scaling, we can help with rolling out, whereas the startups can help us quickly iterate new solutions and technologies that are needed by the market.
Wonderful. And if I can tell you, we also, you refer to it, supply chain and other verticals we have, which is like materials and packaging. And quite frankly, when you would like to implement a technology, it's not only the biotech. You need to have production capability, supply chain capability, and it is for us is getting the product to the market faster. This used to be only in software or digital goods, but now we hope to do it jointly with Roche in diagnostics, bringing it closer to the customer or out of hospitals and labs. Am I correct on that?
You are correct on that. And so I think you're speaking to an area where you also see still quite some potential within our collaboration. We haven't had so much interaction yet with Startup Creosphere, your team and our operations colleagues, but definitely something we have on the radar.
Wonderful. And, you know, coming to COVID-19, because I think right now is the time that we have to come together and hopefully solve the challenges of not only health, but communication, working from home. So there is a lot of challenges that are going to come up. I know Roche has done a great job with the test, and I heard that you are shipping large quantity to US. Can you tell us, was this already developed or did you speed it up, or anything you can shed light on it for us?
I think there were certain things that have been sped up, but not just by us. And I think it's also interesting to look back. If, you know, with the SARS virus in 2003, it took 5 months to get the sequence of the virus that you could actually even start developing a genetic test. Now this time, as soon as the Chinese had isolated the virus, it took 2 days to do the same, right? So after 2 days, mid of January, already a company in Berlin, a small biotech company, developed the first test. And then developing the test itself is yeah, today I would say there are standard technologies to do so. Of course, you have to work well to get a very good test. But then also what we did on our end, we had to bring it to the fully automated system. So in the big laboratories, where you can do a few hundred tests per hour in an automated way. And then the FDA had to approve it. And that was a record, and you can see what is possible if there is a need. The FDA took 24 hours to approve our test. Usually that can take many, many months, but they of course prioritized that. So I think there are a few things that come together in such a crisis situation. Of course, I'm sure our colleagues in production, logistics, everybody had to work day and night to get that done. But the same obviously has happened by other parties that also have now similar tests on the market.
That is great. That is great. And I know that you have clinical trials for COVID-19. I think it was public. Again, I would love to know how long that have been going on, and this emergency that we live in, how much extra effort or speed you could bring to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think the clinical trials for medications, it also started in January, and I know in China, of course, not only our drugs, but they tried different drugs to see if they have a benefit. Also here, I think what we know today about the science, what we know about the virus and how quickly we can characterize such a virus helps a lot. So we have a drug that is actually usually used more for inflammation and arthritis. And apparently in China, they figured out that certain patients that have really severe symptoms, they have kind of an inflammation, an overdrive of the immune system. And then they tried our drug and it seemed to have worked. Now what happened, we had tried to start a clinical trial there. At the end, actually, China put it into the guidelines, but then they ran out of patients. So they didn't have any patients anymore. So then we went to the US, and there's an official trial that started now, and we also have trials ongoing in Italy. So what would that mean, man? I think it's the same situation. There has been time pressure to set this up. I mean, you have to really set it up in a proper way that you can really differentiate what is the effect of the drug and what is just the natural way. I mean, luckily a lot of people recover by themselves from coronavirus. So you have to make sure you can really identify the benefit of the drug. But then our pharma CEO, I mean, he told us last week that they are starting now to produce as much as they can of the drug, even if it's not clear if it actually works or not, but just to be prepared in case it is successful and that we actually have enough of the drug available. Now, I think what is also interesting, you have also startup companies that have looked a little bit closer on the virus and the protein structure of the virus. What is the expressed protein? And then they have, with machine learning based algorithms, they have looked for other existing drugs that are already on the market. I think there's a list of 60 or 70 that have been found that are approved by the FDA and that are now tested in similar trials to see if they actually can help treating certain patients here. So a tremendous effort of the industry and the universities. And I'm also convinced that will help us to find something very, very soon.
Wonderful. That is fantastic. We really appreciate your effort, Roche's effort, Novartis, all of the drug companies in the world. And I think the priorities, the innovation priorities, has really put this in front line. And I believe and I hope that is how we're going to solve it. And if I may ask, because sometimes even when we started working in September 2018, I always say innovation, you need to have urgency. And specifically startups have much more urgency than the big corporations. We kind of say they are in a different time zone because they need to do things faster or else they don't stay alive. And I hate to say COVID-19 gave this urgency to everybody. I'm not sure if you are aware of it or no, but with Munich Re has a challenge to make a non-invasive ventilator, and the deadline, I believe, is Monday. But we feel you could design, build, like not a sophisticated ventilators, but the whole cycle of innovation, at least in this case, is becoming shorter. Do you think there is a learning we could learn from this and keep this mindset that we can do things faster, better, sooner, and hopefully with less money? Because if you shrink the development cycle, you spend less money. What is your thought about that?
I mean, I fully agree. Innovation takes some pressure, right? You need to have some urgency, some reason to act. I also fully agree that this very special situation shows that it is possible, actually, that big companies can almost act like startups. And the good thing is they have a lot of capabilities and also a lot of money to do things. And yeah, the ventilator is a great example where, you know, you have Dyson, like a vacuum company out of the UK now producing ventilators. In Italy, it's Decathlon. I don't know if you have heard that, a French company. They're using diving masks, and they have rebuilt diving masks into simple ventilators, but that also is sufficient for thousands of patients. So you can see what also big companies can do if there is a pressure to do so. So yes, I hope some of that will stay, and that people will also see that actually how much they can help, how much they can contribute to something where there's an urgent need, and that should motivate people to maybe after that also sometimes be a little bit more and say, hey, there's a problem. Yes, it's not concretely on our radar at the moment, but actually I think we can solve it, so let's just do it.
You know, coming back to a little bit personal, and I must say, you know, we work with about 400 corporations around the world. Some of them have more urgency to work with startup, more urgency to do digital transformation. It has been great working with you personally, because I think you have like more degree than I have ever seen, plus the MBA you have. What is like, and you're the head of innovation and our main contact for this project. What is the learnings you have got from working with startups in the last 2 years that you can share with other large corporations, pharmas, medical companies? Let's say if you had 5 learnings, what would it be you would tell to our colleagues internally as well as externally? What do they need to do internally to get people ready?
Yeah. So, you know, internally, what was surprising for me, but I have seen that at Daimler with the startup Autobahn also, when I saw the pitches of the startups, and then also the engineers that have been working maybe for 30 years within a big car company, but they were super excited to work with startups. So, and I was thinking, okay, why is that? But it's quite natural, because these people went to university, they trained to do research, to develop new things, but then they are kind of stuck for 30 years in their regular, you know, yes, let's develop the new car, the next generation, but they probably don't have a lot of opportunities to think outside the box. And we have found in Roche also quite a lot of people that said, hey, this is exactly what we need to do. right? And so we didn't really go through kind of from top down and said, okay, now let's identify people in your teams that could help us, and they probably want to work with a startup. We went more like the bottom-up approach, and these people then they took a lot of time. I'm sure they did their regular job at least as good as before, but in addition, they also worked with the startups and engaged, and then they infected other people, and other people came onto the startup Riosphere platform. So I think that was one of the biggest learnings, that these people exist. You can motivate them. Of course, you have to give them some kind of a credit. But that's not money. That's giving them the freedom to work with startups, giving them the opportunity to present together with the startup. So really the more simple things about the topic itself, and not about any fancy process or stuff.
In fact, if I can add to what you said, we feel there has to be a champion like you coordinating the effort with different business units. But if the business units start with the challenge and they are involved in selecting the startup and then doing the pilot, then rolling it out is not a problem. So we feel, as you said, it's good that if there is some people in different business units that on top of their normal work, they want to do this interesting work. Am I correct on that?
Yes, you're correct. And then of course, yes, it's important to mention this interesting work fits still with their overall strategy, right? And I think, and we have heard that from several of them, it actually helped them to advance faster with their strategy or their future roadmaps, because they have learned so much from the startups. And they have potentially even gotten a solution that solves them a problem that they thought we probably have to solve it ourselves. And the augmented reality is actually a good example, where people were thinking, oh, we have to develop here something for the next 3 years. But then it turned out there is something out there which we can immediately use.
Wonderful. Because I mentioned Mercedes a few times, I have to mention Porsche and Volkswagen Group. They do a lot of pilots with us. And I am pleased to say that a couple of our startups are in the Porsche Cayenne, the all-electric car. And they, from the time Porsche met them till the time that they chose the technology to implement it, took 18 months. And in the automotive industry, that never happens. Do you feel we could do the same thing? Like the urgency of this COVID-19 has really taken healthcare by the storm. But do you think we could keep this speed, not as much as it is now, but can there be a learning from these ventilators that they were built in, I believe, less than 30 days? Hopefully your test and, the drugs that will treat this. Do you think there could be something good coming out of this COVID-19?
So I think what I see also in the digital health space is that now a lot of solutions that actually have already been available are suddenly becoming super exciting, and people are starting to use them. I think I just saw statistics that more than 50% of the doctor visits are now virtual suddenly, right? And it was not because the technology was not there. It was there, but there were barriers, right? There was no reimbursement in some cases. So this is changing rapidly. We have also, if you look at FibriCheck out of our program with their app for atrial fibrillation, they are designing now care plans with hospitals in certain countries to avoid any visits to the cardiologist, right? To just do it remotely. Or baby scripts also from our program, they have said they have a 10 times increase in the number of registered pregnant women in the last weeks. That also say, we want to have prenatal care, but we want to remove the doctor's visit. So I think that kind of change there's a lot of potential because technology exists, but it hasn't just been adapted for many, many reasons.
Yes, you know, when we had what we call COVID-19 super deal flow last week, the interesting thing is when we announced something, we would have been happy to have 100 people show up and be excited. And it's a long flight from Munich to San Francisco. But even though we did it in less than 7 days, we had 1,800 people in that selection day. And I really think that is a big learning of face-to-face meetings. But I think in the future, we will have face-to-face meeting, plus we will have much bigger audience online. Similar to what you talked about telemedicine. I really think it's going to stay with us much stronger after this terrible event is behind us. So maybe if you can give us some closing remarks. As far as I am concerned, I really am excited to move all our activities digital, like this Fireside Chat and the 4 great startups that are going to tell what they have done with Roche. But any closing remarks on your side?
Yeah, no, I'm also looking forward to continue our collaboration. We have some really great startups, and you'll see some of them now also in the pitch session that are also working with us to solve the problem, the big problem. And I'm, as always, optimistic, despite the really, really difficult times at the moment, that this will also bring some good stuff, some good for the world, especially on how we can all work together to solve such problems and help people in need.
Wonderful, Dr. Jochen. I look forward to going to Burger and Lobster with you soon in Munich. And it is really great having you with us, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Saeed.
I turn it to you, Simon.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. That was a great conversation. Jochen, we had a question here about the big challenges around getting our arms around the crisis from a diagnostic perspective and around the testing. Maybe you could speak to some of the big challenges that you're seeing out there with respect to just even knowing how big the crisis has become.
Yeah, so of course, I mean, as we discussed before, developing the test is one thing, getting it approved, doing the necessary test, the validation of the test. But then I think the testing, there's obviously a whole other chain of things that need to be in place, right? From a logistics perspective, which people do you test? It's clear you cannot test 300 million patients or citizens in the US in one day, right? It also doesn't make any sense. So you need triage tools, and you will see later from Medicus or from Informatica what they have built to triage patients. You need monitoring tools to make sure, okay, this is the patients I have to follow up. And then we also need additional tests. So we need tests, fast tests. There have been also some developed and launched the last weeks. So it's the whole multitude of who do you test, how do you manage the sample flow, and that needs to come together. And that's why it's also not one company that can solve it. It's actually a multitude of people and companies that have to work together.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And that really segues nicely into the next question, which is, once the sort of crisis came to the fore, we're seeing from the news that Germany's really been an exemplar in the response. And curious about what your thoughts are in relation to that, but also how did you and your team organize once it was obvious that this was going to be a big situation?
Yeah. So I think to the second part of the question, I think the teams were pretty quick in looking at it and starting to think, how can we develop a test, and how can we do that now? Because we have seen that before, there were other crises where new pathogens came up. So we have kind of a plan in place. What do we do in such cases, and how do we mobilize? I mean, we also have to mobilize on other tests, because now you have a lot of people that are actually having a sepsis, they're having inflammation. So we have to reschedule our production, and we have to use more tests of certain types and less tests on others. So it's not just on that, it's really has influence on our whole product portfolio. Now, when you look at how did the different countries adapt to it, I think what could have been done better is to do it a bit more systematically. I mean, even within countries, and that's also in Germany, you have different rules, different ways of counting, right? For example, in some countries, you don't even test for the virus if somebody has died. So you get different types of statistics. And if you look at the media, it's also, they usually give you a number, right? They give you how many new infections. Well, honestly, that doesn't tell you anything. If you don't know how many people have been tested, you don't know who has been tested, it really doesn't give you much information. So I think there is a big lack of data. We're talking about big data, but here we definitely have small data, and that doesn't help.
Yeah, look, one of the big things that we know is that can be challenges in bringing startups and integrating them within a large global organization. And particularly in the current time, the urgency is, more urgent than ever. Maybe you could talk about how has Roche, how have you built that infrastructure to bring in startups into your business units, and how is that working in the current time?
Yeah, so I think it would probably be impossible to really bring in a startup in our infrastructure. What we do concretely with Medicus is that we have a team in place which consists, I think, of about 10 or 15 countries, so representatives from these countries that look into the Medicus solution that has been built by Medicus for COVID triaging, but also monitoring of patients. And now what we do is we try to help Medicus to bring that in these countries. So that on the one hand means you need to connect with healthcare experts that can actually then, according to the current guidelines that at the moment change basically on a daily basis almost, right? That we have some experts that can actually look at the triaging in that app and make sure it's correct, but then also connect to healthcare authorities where we have very good connections to make sure that this can be rolled out there very quickly. Now, to roll that out, obviously you cannot integrate that in a hospital EMR system or whatever. I mean, the only way is basically an app store concept or something like that.
Yeah, fantastic.
But yeah, it's more like on a helping each other out than on a technical integration.
Yeah, perhaps you could talk a little bit about how it actually works with your team. Like when the crisis came, together, how did you organize and communicate with your team to have that internal coordination?
Yeah. So since we are in digital, of course, we are very used to have the digital conversation. So for us, it wasn't so difficult to just switch everything to virtual meetings. That has been working very well. The technology is now very good. I think it has been a bigger challenge than for the people that still have to go to produce certain things, to go to the lab, to develop certain tests. But for us, it has been good. I also have to say, I think in the company, there has been a good, from our leadership teams, a good way of managing that, of having regular check-ins, virtual town halls, because it's not only about business, right? It's also now to help people to cope with the situation, being some of them alone at home. Then in Switzerland, it's a particular situation. The parents actually have to be the teachers of their children, right? They only get the material, but there's no virtual teaching. They have to teach themselves. So suddenly they have like a completely additional responsibility. And so, of course, you have to be conscious of, how do you manage that to put not too much burden on these employees?
We've got a question here, and this maybe scopes out a little bit about the general program, but as you have been engaging with Creosphere and startups, what is your process internally, and perhaps even at the moment, in need finding and discovering, what are the priorities of the business units that you can meet?
Yeah. So we take a lot of time for the finding of the focus areas, the definition. So we usually start about 3 months before the program starts. And we talk to stakeholders that we know. Also here, there's not like a real process that everybody has to be asked. So we have our connections, and that grows over time. And then we go through the process of having a long list, having a short list, and then we have really, with the topic owners, which usually are business people or R&D people, they make the final selections, or we have calls with the startups, and we really match not only from a technology point of view, but also from a team, because when you talk to a startup on the phone, you fairly quickly figure out, well, does that also fit from a human team perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. And, we hear that that language around, like, we really look at the team. Are you able to break that down? Like, what are some of the things that when you are speaking with a startup that you say, yes, that team really does have the qualities of the kind of people we want to work with?
Yeah. Well, on the one hand, it's actually, there's also some stuff which you see from how the team is set up. So usually, I think we prefer if it's a diverse team, right, that has different expertise, because also healthcare is quite specific. If you have only technology, it might be sometimes a bit more difficult. But then from a team, yeah, I mean, you hear kind of about their expertise, but also their ambitions. Some of them are maybe too ambitious. Some of them might not directly see the value that Roche can bring to them, but sometimes this actually also can be addressed in a conversation where we have also to explain what we think we can bring and what we need. So it's not only that, that it's always a team thing from the other partner. Right? It's also about this coming together.
Right. And I suppose, is there a particular sweet spot in terms of early stage, growth stage that you guys focus on, or is it very dependent on the needs of the business?
So we usually look for startups that already have at least a prototype, or ideally even maybe something on the market. The reason is more our internal innovation model, where we are more bound to invest in these things where we can already see something and we can test something. But so we don't look necessarily at the Series A or B funding. That's less for us a relevant topic, or how old is the company. It's more about where are they with respect to the technology or product that they have.
Fantastic. And look, just as we land the plane in this Q&A section, in our last one, it was really wonderful to hear from both Saeed and Matthias about, how are you personally keeping encouraged? We were talking earlier before this webcast about the incredible volume of work that happens in the digital world, but what sort of things are you doing personally to keep up with everything?
Yeah, for me, sports is really, really important. So I'm at least every Saturday, Sunday, I'm a few hours either on the bike or on the skis or whatever. So because it helps me a lot to kind of get my brain restarted.
Yeah, fantastic. And Saeed, have you any new hobbies in this whole digital landscape?
Yes, I must say I miss my golf a lot. I don't know how much I'm missing golf. So I am I used to go for a walk every day, but actually now I divide my walk into 3 different walks, 20, 30 minutes each. And I see it will refresh me and it will getting me back ready to get on the Zoom. Again, I love the interaction of people. I love walking people in and out of my office, but realistically now we just have to sit. And perhaps there is a new idea that you could have a Zoom brace and you can walk around with while talking. No, but realistically, it's just as Dr. Jochen said, I try to be active, walking, and I am even doing a little bit of chipping in my backyard,
Fantastic. And Jochen, that's the last question. I mean, in terms of coming out of this crisis, in terms of work systems or even for patients, you know, what do you see as the major upsides or silver linings, or opportunities that can be embraced during this time?
Yeah, I think it's really the digital health solutions that people have now experienced them, and they will say, why did I ever prefer to go to a physician, sit 3 hours in a waiting room, get infected with all the other stuff that people have, and instead of just turning on my video conference and talk to the doctor directly, right? I think that could make a huge change for the healthcare industry.
Fantastic. Well, look, this was an incredibly engaging conversation. Thank you so much for giving us your time, to both of you. And we're going to move on to the next stage of this morning, which is our startup pitches. So thanks again.
Thank you, Jochen. Thank
Jochen.
you. Great seeing you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.